Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Last week, we spoke about the soul. We spoke in the first chapter about the animalistic soul. The second chapter, we spoke about the godly soul. We said that this order was done simply because that's the way it is. The body is first created, then Hashem blew into his nostrils the breath of life. We spoke about the fact that even a boy and a girl before 12 or 13, they only have the Yetzer Hara, the animalistic side, the evil inclination, but the godly inclination is awakened only at the age of bat mitzvah. Now we're going to talk about the faculties of the soul. Now this word faculties of the soul is a very fancy word. What that means exactly, we're going to talk about the kochot hanefesh. There are different powers of the soul. There are different channels of the soul. There's a certain anatomy of the soul of how it's created, how it functions, and at the same time, how it interacts with the body. Because I saw once written in the Rebbe writes this, that haguf, the body is hidgalut haneshama. The body is the revelation of the soul. So when you see the image of the body, the way the body operates, right, it's really telling you a little about how the soul operates. And we want to be able to ascend to a level where we are in perfect fusion between body and soul. That's how we're going to come in fusion with Hashem. Today we're going to talk about the three brains. We're going to focus specifically on this capacity of the brain, the mind, how that operates. והנה, סייס פרק ג' והנה כל בחינה ומדרגה משלוש אלו נפש רוח ונשמה כלולה מ10 בחינות כנגד 10 ספירות עליונות שנשתלשלו מהם הנחלקות לשתיים שהן 3 אבות ו7 כפולות. What happens is the following. Every soul is made of 10 faculties. You have 3 brains, wisdom, understanding, and call it focus, clarity, knowledge, bonding, fusion, da'at. That's chokhmah, bina, and da'at. Then you have the sheva kfulot. You have 7 double aspects, double midot, which are basically kindness, severity, harmony, victory, humility, foundation, and then royalty. Now, what exactly are we talking about? We are saying here that there are 2 ways that God operates. There's a way that God operates for himself, and there's a way that God operates for the outside. We too, in the way we are created, there is what is ourselves, is personal to us, and there is what makes us interact with others. So I'm going to go directly in the crux of the subject. He says like this, וכך בנפש האדם שנחלקו לשתיים שכל ומידות. We have intellect and we have midot, we have emotions. השכל כולל חוכמה ובינה ודעת, והמידות הן אהבת השם ופחדו ויראתו לפארו, וחב"ד נקראו אימות ומקור למידות, כי המידות הן תולדות חב"ד. He says, basically, the brain is the mother that gives birth to the emotion. Hashem, when he creates the world, the way he creates the world is with emotions. Let's explain. I'm going to give you a very simple diagram of the Magen David, and you're going to get it right away. Imagine a Magen David, which is a triangle going up, and I would say even a triangle going inwards. You have another triangle going down, and I would say even going outwards. What is that? The brain is the triangle of chokhmah, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which is going inwards. In order for one to become a big sage, to have a lot of knowledge, he doesn't need anybody. You could just sit down in your library and study and study and study and become very, very wise. In order for one to connect above, he doesn't need anybody. And actually, sometimes in the study or in the connection that you have, if somebody's going to be there, it could be a hafra'ah, it could be actually a distraction. So you need your space to be able to connect above. But when we talk about emotions, is it possible for me to do chesed, to do kindness with no one? No, it's impossible. I need somebody to share my kindness with. Is it possible for me to get upset if there's no one there to get upset? Am I going to get upset at who? I'm going to be strict with whom? So basically, you have two movements. We have two things that are happening in our soul. We have the intellectual part of ourselves, and we have the emotional part of ourselves. The one which is personal and the one which is interpersonal. Now, the interpersonal, the emotions, how do we give birth to emotions? The brains are called imaot, they're called the mothers. Why? Because the emotions are the children of the brain. So how does it work? There's a process. This is going to be a 3-step process. שבנפש המשכלת, שהוא המשכיל כל דבר נקרא בשם חוכמה כוח מה, וכשמוציא כוחו על הפועל, שמתבונן בשכלו להבין דבר להשאירו לעומקו, בתוך איזה דבר חוכמה המושכל בשכלו נקרא בינה, והן הם והם המולידות אהבת השם, ויראתו ופחדו. We have in the brain a masculine brain and a feminine brain. The masculine brain is called chokhmah. Chokhmah, it says in the Tikkunei Zohar, is the same letters as the word koach ma, the power of what is. What do you mean the power of what is? What does that mean? Well, sometimes there's a situation where a person finds himself studying or thinking deeply, and he needs to look for a solution to a problem. And suddenly there is some type of illumination that illuminates everything, just like Barak HaMavrik, just like lightning. If you've ever been in Florida at a time where there's no power, well, it's beautiful because you're able to see all the stars. If you live in a building, especially a tall building where you're able to see the whole city, the moment that the lightning appears, for that split second, the whole city is lit. You see everything. And then it just disappears. The same is with koach ma. The power of what is means that there is something which is an inspiration, a creative revelation that is from above, that comes to my mind, an idea, which we are going to call the Seminal Idea. And that Seminal Idea just makes everything clear. And therefore, I, the individual going through this experience, I'm at a loss. I say, ma, like, what? Right? What is this? I lose myself, I surrender myself to this Seminal Idea. The only problem with the Seminal Idea is just like a lightning, it comes in and it leaves. So now I have that clarity for a second, but I need to be able to absorb it. The husband brings the Seminal Idea, he brings the seed. But once that seed is planted, there needs to be a development of the seed into a child. The same thing is, this is the masculine part of the brain, which is, wow. And then you have the feminine part of the brain, which takes the idea and starts developing it, right? It's interesting that even in the conception of a child, right, the egg divides itself in two, and the two divide themselves in four, and four divides itself in eight, and slowly, this division by twos till it starts forming something. It reminds us of the binary system of 0, 1, 0, 1. Is it why the word binary comes from the word bina? Bina, which means understanding, which represents the woman. So, this is just like the difference there exists between the letter Yud and the letter He. We know that if you look at the word Ish in Hebrew, Aleph, Yud, Shin, you take out the Yud, which is a dot, which represents Chokhmah, and you're left with the word Esh, fire. The woman is Aleph, Shin, and Hey, there's no Yud. You take out the Hey, which is Bina, which is the concept of understanding, development of the wisdom, of the idea, and you have again the word Esh. So you see here that masculine is a Yud, it's a dot, it's solution oriented, right? While the woman, right, the feminine is not solution oriented. I want to have a depth, I want to be able to talk things out, I want to be able to develop things. So just like the hay, which is developed, it has a width, it has a depth, it has a height, it has a length. So the idea is to be able to bring these two together in perfect unison. Which means that the seminal idea and the actual development of the idea, they should be able to match. I'm going to give you a very simple example. You sit and you dream about a home, a house. And the house is going to have 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms. It's going to have a view on the sun. And it's going to be here, it's going to be this way and that way. And the kitchen is going... So these are all ideas. And in your mind's eye, you see it all. It's there. It's like a flash where everything, this is my dream house. Then you need to develop it, and you need to develop it on paper. And then you need to start explaining it to the architect, unless you're an architect yourself. And it becomes a process where you need to be able to put it on paper, develop it, and there is the idea now that is on paper, and it looks the way it looks. But when is it going to be really the way it's supposed to be, when I actually have the home that I'm looking for? And what's on the plans actually matches what's on the, in the reality. The reality matches what's on the plans. So there's 2 forces, the masculine and feminine part of the brain, which are finding together to a certain extent. One brings a flash, has super clarity, the other one is searching, is comparing. And that is the level of Bina. So that's what he says here. That after you have the Koach Ma, you develop the idea, you develop the concepts that's going through your mind. And you give birth to the love of God, or to the fear of Hashem. To the awe, the fear of Hashem. כי השכל שבנפש המשכלת כשמתבונן ומעמיק מאוד בגדולת השם, איך הוא ממלא כל העין מסובב, כל העין מכולה כמה כאלו חשי, נולדה ונתעוררה יראת הרוממות במוחו מחשבתו. לירה ולהתבושש מגדולתו יתברך שאין לעשוב את אחיו פח השם בליבו. It says basically what's happening. I'm thinking of a concept. I'm thinking about the fact, let's say now we're going to take these thoughts and we're going to put them in holiness. I'm going to contemplate on the fact that God fills every possible creation, mineral life, vegetable life, animal life, mankind, in perfect detail. Within the body itself, how it fills the eye to make it see, the ears to make them hear, the hands, and that vitality is there. And all the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. Everything, the trees, the birds, the vitality that's in God encloses itself in this. And then there's a dimension of God which is even higher than that, that is not able to enclose itself because it's so high. And then I go deeper in my meditation and contemplation of the idea. I develop it even more. And I realize that everything is really nothing for Hashem. The whole creation is not really a real existence. The only real existence is God. At that moment, if I intensify that thought, I'm going to have I'm going to be awe-stricken. I'm going to love Hashem. I'm going to be excited. I'm going to awaken myself to be thirsty for Hashem. I'm going to give you an example that everybody will relate to. Sometimes somebody tells you something. A person tells you a comment, they complain about something. Somebody tells you a little piece of Lashon Hara that concerns you. And suddenly, your mind took away the focus from anything else and is just thinking deeply about this. And you're thinking, and I'm sorry that I'm using a negative example, but because it's natural to us, imagine if we use the same thing in the godly way, in a positive way, how good it would be. And you start thinking, so if this happened, then this means there's this consequence. And if that happened, there's this consequence. And if they lied, and now I caught them in their lie, and and you start developing this whole thing in your mind. And then you realize it was premeditated. And then suddenly, you can't help it. You now gave birth to an emotion. And the level of intensity that you have in your mind in thinking, and the deep thinking, the deeper the thinking, the more intense this emotion of rage or this upset, right, will activate itself in yourself, right? It's a natural thing. So let's take the negative away because we don't want any of that. Imagine if we actually contemplated on the greatness of Hashem. To the extent when we realize the miracles and wonders that are happening and how Hashem is renewing the world every second and so on and so forth. And what we have to be thankful for. And we train our mind to do so. And we think it in depth. At that moment, you're going to have a feeling that you feel so insignificant. I'm a little piece of sand, right? Speck of dust. This great universe, everything, Hashem is so immense. But I am connected to Him. So at that moment, you have that excitement, that love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what it says. You have a fire awakened in you. With great desire, drive. You want to be one with Hashem. And this is the level of kalut nefesh. The soul wants to literally leave the body. Once they come close to this reality, it leaves everything else. Just like when you're upset, you abandon all the other ideas that are super important in your life and you just focus on that. Imagine just focusing on God. Focusing on the greatness of Hashem and being so driven that you don't want anything of this world. And we see who expressed this the best. David HaMelech. David HaMelech says, My soul is thirsty for you, God. My soul is thirsty for you. Where does this thirst for Hashem come from? It comes from the aspect of fire which is in the heart. Which is in the heart, which is in the soul. As it says, כמו שכתבו, וכן הוא בעץ חיים שיסוד האש הוא בלב ומקור המים והלחות מהמוח. So you have the coldness, the source of water and coldness which is in the mind, the source of fire which is in the heart. Now you have to balance both. It's very difficult. You need to be able to take that fire and mellow it and drive it and channel it in a way that is going to be well channeled. Because we know that when we have fire in the heart, it can go in all directions. Even a good fire, if it's not a fire that is dominated, mastered by the mind, you can lose it. Emotionally, you can be a wreck, you can go in all places. And that's what it says. כמו שכתבו הטבעים, we say, והלכות מהמוח, כמו שכתוב בעץ חיים, שער נון, שהיא בחינת חוכמה, שנקראת מים שבנפש אלוקית. ושאר המידות, כולם מננפי היראה והאהבה ותולדותיהם. It says all the other midot, all the other emotions that there are.
Where is it compared to mind? Mind nefesh elokit?
Oh, yes, so the soul, the mind is like water. It cools down the fire. When you're contemplating on something, I'm going to give you an example. Okay, this is very bad what I'm going to say for a second. It's very bad. We, sometimes we have different animalistic desires. We like certain foods. Everybody in the community knows that I have a little weakness for sushi. So one day I'm at the restaurant with the individual, and we have a sushi plate in front of us that we are sharing, and there's one piece left. And he tells me, take it. And at this moment I realize, how much am I going to succumb to my drives, my animalistic drives? This little piece, last piece, is going to control me. And that morning I had taken the time to pray with more intention, with more kavanah, with more time and understanding and contemplating. So I decided, I told him, please 1 second, give me a second. I put my hand on my forehead and I tried to put myself back in the situation I was at the moment of prayer, where I felt Hashem is great, I am small. I just wanted to put and use, try it, I mean, it's nice to teach, Tanya, but try what you're saying. And at that moment, the little fire that was inside of me just was completely cooled off by my mind. I gladly put this piece of sushi and I put it in the other person's plate with absolutely no desire for it. Many times, the fact that we are all fire comes from the fact that we didn't take the time. We can, with our mind, with meditation, it's possible to actually take over the mind, take over the heart. There was a particular rabbi that used to hit his children. And one day, see that we have some construction going on here. So we have to keep a sane mind. So one day he went to see the Rebbe and he said this. He said, the Rebbe asked him, imagine for a second that these children were not yours, would you dare raise your hand on them? He said, never. He says, you have to know that these children were given to you from Hashem. They really belong to God. They don't belong to you. And when you meditate and contemplate on this, you'll be able to concentrate yourself, you'll be able to control yourself. But then the Rebbe said something else. And besides that, with meditation, a person can actually control all of his desires. So it really starts at the mind level. When we speak about mind over matter, doesn't mean that I don't mind and you don't matter. No. Means that you put your mind in a place where the thought of a person is, that's where he is. And we have the power with our mind to be able to cool off the heart and give it another direction. We have that power, but we have to train ourselves. And that's the whole concept, if you ask me. The whole concept of exile is directly the opposite, is a polar opposite of this. What is exile? What is a slave? A slave is somebody who doesn't have time to think. I'm consistently doing, and I'm busy, and I'm this, and with the phones today, we don't have time to think. So to take the time to pray, and before prayer, to take the time to think and contemplate before whom I'm talking. Who am I asking? You know, I once heard somebody say, don't tell God how big your problems are, tell your problems how big God is. But how do you do that? You do that once you contemplate on the greatness of Hashem. When you turn to God, and God for you is, oh, wow, God. So at that moment, when I'm asking from God, I know my prayer is going to be because Hashem can do it. But if the God that I have in my mind is so small, and there's no, you understand? So it starts with really, with investing, with controlling, with awakening the emotions, changing the directions of the emotions. Now, he continues and says that this will give birth to the love and to fear. If you look at love and fear, let's use language. There's pleasure, pleasure and pain. Right? So imagine that now I want to take my pleasure. My pleasure is going to be to love God. Right? My pain is going to be to wait away from Hashem. So now I'm already looking at things in a different plane altogether. I'm not affected by what's in the world. I really, my pain and pleasure, my love and fear is at another level altogether. So you have to know that all the other emotions, they all are offshoots of that love and fear of Hashem.
I thought there was no fear.
What?
There should be fear.
That's a great question. Should there be fear? So a lot of people I know, right. Jonathan Lennon said, all you need is love. But it's not only that. You need to be able to recognize before whom you are. If you only have love, it can become a world of complete hefkerut, of complete nonsense where there's no boundaries whatsoever. You would never think for a second to drive a car only pressing on the accelerator. You need to moderate the acceleration in order to make the right turns and not to crash. If it's only about love, well, it's great. But one second. If God is so awesome, I need to have some type of reverence to Hashem. Not fear of punishment. The problem is, if you're talking about fear of punishment of a God that's going to hit you because you did, that type of fear, yes, needs to go out of the, right? Unless it's going to help you not sin and not do the wrong thing. Of course, if a person is going to have, this is a basic level of fear that a person is about to steal or to hurt somebody else, and he has the fear that God, yes, you should have fear, there's no question about it. It's a question of how do you behave in front of such a God? One day there was a Chassid by the name of Rabbi Shem Tov. And he had come from Russia. He was one of the 10 Hasidim that shook his hand with the previous Rebbe and took upon himself to spread Judaism, even if it meant that he's going to be killed. If he was caught, he would be killed. So one day, and he was a very pnimi, he was a very, he didn't do things superficially, he did things with great depth. And one day he is at a Farbrengen of the Rebbe and he's holding himself like this. Very atypical, not typical at all of a Lubavitch Chassid, because Chassidim don't do external motions. So somebody came up to him, he says, "You're so superficial." He said, "I'm not superficial. I'm very thought through. But since I see all of you don't really understand in front of whom you're standing when you stand by the Rebbe, I have to show you what type of reverence you should have in front of him. So yes, we need love, but at the same time we need to understand before whom I stand. Because if I don't have that, of course, you could say the same thing about children. You need love, but I'm going to disrespect you because it's only about love? No. I'm a child. I still need a certain level of respect to my parents." So, כמו שכתוב במקום אחר, והדעת, and now my favorite. The whole purpose is to take the image, which is the male image and the female image, the seminal idea and the development idea, and to put them that they should be exactly in perfect fusion. That is that. That is the third level of Chokhmah Bina. That is the fusion, the focus. But where do we see this expression in the Torah? It says, "Ve'ha'adam yada et Hava ishto ve'ayu lebasar echad." It says, and man, Adam, got to know his wife, and they became one flesh. What does that mean? Ve'ui lashon itkashrut. That means a fusion, a connection. Ve'itchabrut shemekasher da'ato, that you attach your mind, your knowledge, bekesher amitz ve'chazak, with a very powerful, tight bond. Ve'ikam achshavato, and you plant your idea bechozek, with strength, in the greatness of Hashem. Very strong. Ve'eino masiach dato, and he does not get distracted by anything. He is completely focused on the idea of the greatness of Hashem. Ki af shemishu chacham ve'navon b'gdulat ensof, because even if somebody is great, he's wise, he's so wise about the greatness of Hashem, he knows all the books of Kabbalah and he knows to explain the biggest concept. If he's not going to attach his mind and focus it on a specific, that specifically, and attach his mind with strength and diligence, he will not be able to have true love, true fear and true love of Hashem. It will be fantasies. It will be his imagination. And therefore that, having that focus and fusion, is what's going to make the emotions stand. וכולל חסד וגבורה, פירוש אהבה וענפיה ויראה וענפיה. And this includes basically all the midot, love and fear of Hashem, kindness and severity. I'm going to explain to you this concept. In the Zohar HaKadosh, in the Tikkun Zohar, it says over there that you have a mother bird that's on its nest. And the mother bird can there's a mitzvah of shiluach hakan. If you find a nest and the mother is hovering over the eggs or the chicks, send the mother away. And then the pasuk says, "Lo tikach haem al habanim." This is in Parashat Kitetse. Do not take the mother from the children. So there are three stages the Tikkun Zohar speaks about. It says the stage where the mother is hovering over the eggs, hovering over the chicks, and the moment that the mother is over the actual children and they're one. Let's explain. We explained here in this chapter that the seminal idea is planted in the bina, in the understanding, where chokhmah and bina come together. There's a union. That union is going to give birth to emotions. But according to the depth of that union, the development and the focus and concentration there's going to be, that's the type of emotions you're going to give birth to. So the Tikkun Zohar says like this: there's emotions, there's a meditation basically which is at a level 3 out of 10. It's going to give birth to eggs. Very nice eggs, which means the mother is bina, which is the understanding, which is hovering over the eggs, over these emotions. Oh, I want to change. Today I'm inspired. I'm going to never do it again. But it's closed into an egg. It's an idea that just went through your mind. You felt good for 30 seconds, 10 minutes, and it flew away. Tomorrow you continued eating the cake, or whatever it is. Then you have a meditation which is a little deeper. So what happens with that type of meditation? You're going to give birth to chicks. So we'll start flying. You feel more, an emotion which is more real, but it's still not independent. And then you have a deep meditation, a deep concentration, where you really train yourself to focus and separate yourself from everything else, and you focus on something. And then the idea that's in your mind, the development of the idea, you go so deep inside till they become one, and then they give birth to a real emotion. And once you have that emotion and it's a full-grown bird, which means it could fly by itself, you have a drive and you are ready to connect. Nothing is going to stop you. So really it starts at the level of focus. When we talk about exile, for me the definition of exile and the definition of redemption from exile starts at the mind level. Coming out of Egypt is that what's in the mind is able to go through the Egypt, which is the throat, which is straits, it's tight, and it's able to reach the heart. Once something reaches the heart, the drive of the heart, nobody can stop. Nobody can stop. And that's why it's important to calm the brain and to teach it to focus. So I'm going to give you a practical exercise to do. I have a friend in Venetian Island, Rabbi Amar. And we did this many years ago. We used to study in the mornings. And one day we decided to do a little exercise for the brain, exercise for the soul. We decided that I and him will be in contact by phone. And we're going to put 8 alarms on our phones. And for 1 minute, 8 times through the day, we're going to take the concept of Hasidic philosophy that we studied that day and review it in our minds. Stop everything we're doing it, but just on the clock for 1 minute. I want to tell you, it was such a liberation. It was like having a chiropractic adjustment where suddenly you feel liberated of certain stresses and your mind is calm and you're able to focus and you're able to have a clear mind. I will tell you that I didn't do it for 8 times. I wasn't able to. We did it maybe for 3 to 5 times in the day. But that 1 minute made a world of a difference. I would advise that if we could do this 3 minutes, 3 times a day, You take a concept that you've studied and you start just training your mind to just focus on the concept. And when you have ideas which are just coming through your mind bothering you, just imagine that they're just like a leaf falling in a river and it's just going to go away. You just focus on one idea. Today, if I had to rename the Yetzer Hara, I would call him distraction. Today, the main manipulation of the evil inclination is distraction. If you ask me, what is the main distractor? Is it the cell phone? Is it the computer? Is it social media? What makes us waste our time the most? It's our brain. If my brain was in focus and I was on a mission, and I know, imagine if before we start working, we take 1 minute to contemplate on the goal that I want to accomplish. What is my purpose right here? You know, there are meetings where they start a meeting and they say, okay, what do we want to come out of this meeting with? Then you have the other ones, which are board meetings for bored people, and which are just everybody talks, and in the end there's no conclusion. That is here to give an emotion, to give a drive, to have a drive in the right place. So it starts with focusing the mind. There's nothing else, right? It's just a question of just owning in and just saying, 1 second, I'm just going to focus on that point. I'm going to try to develop it at my level. You could do this, for example, with the good things you have in your life. If you don't, I'm going to contemplate on all the good things I have in my life, right? And I'm going to focus on that. And you develop how that affects me. And if things were not good, what would I be spending my day for, right? And appreciate it, So, just having that discussion brings a person more in focus. But doing the exercise, it's difficult. But I want to tell you that there are Hasidim that used to pray for hours and hours and would be in a state of focus which would disconnect them completely from the world. But the purpose was not to be disconnected from the world, but afterwards to have such a resolve and such a clarity about who the master of the universe is, that when it comes to your emotional troubles, your emotional roller coaster, there's no emotion. My emotions are given to Hashem. It's all very clear. God bless you all. Thank you very much for joining.